Thanks, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order, starting with a roll call, beginning with Joe.
Here.
John.
Here.
Yana. Here. Christina. Here. And we have Jen virtually.
Here.
And we have Nicole virtually.
Here.
We have a quorum. Thank you, everyone. Nicole, has this meeting been properly to call this meeting to order, starting with a roll call, beginning with Joe.
Here.
John.
Here.
Donna. Here. Christina. Here. And we have Jen virtually.
Here.
And we have Nicole virtually.
Here.
We have a forum. Thank you, everyone. Nicole, has this meeting been started to call this meeting to order, starting with a... Okay, I've been accused of repeating myself, but not quite so. Okay, so we do have a roll call vote, and Nicole, has this meeting been properly noticed?
It has.
Thank you so much. John, would you go ahead and read our equity and mission statements?
Certainly. So the VSD equity statement is each student has access to the resources and educational rigor they need at the right moment in their education, regardless of race, gender, ethnicity, ability, language, family background, or family income. And our R1 results policy, our mission statement, is that each student will acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to achieve their personal goals, thrive in a global society, and lead a healthy, self-fulfilling life.
Thank you, John. Let's take a look at the agenda. Does anyone have any questions about the remainder of the agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented? So moved. A motion from Yana. Do I have a second?
Second.
A second from John. All in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Clarity for the superintendent's report.
All right, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good to see you. I'm excited to do the superintendent's report, and I will open up with a very preliminary discussion of the climate survey. I say very preliminary because we fully understand and know that our board, our community, and our staff, broader staff, have an expectation for a full comprehensive analysis of survey results. We also don't want to put too much time in between without communicating next steps. So we're going to try to accomplish that today and set the dates for the full formal presentation to the Board of Education. And then also a timeline for distributing the information to our community and to schools. So as you can see in the slide in your presentation, we're happy that we've had nearly 4,000 responses. We're most proud that the majority came from our students. We understand that we are an organization that's in service of students, and we were able to collect a good number of student voices. We also had a good representation when you look at trends of responses for staff. So we have over 50% of our staff, and then over 1,000 parents and families that contributed. So we feel confident so far that we have a good response rate. We look forward to digging into our data to look at representation within those rates as well. So the survey itself covered 4 domains, and those were elements of the school and building environment itself, our academic environment, our social environment, and inclusiveness. And an example of inclusiveness would be that sense of belonging that we know is a power standard and strong expectation from our board. As we think about our VSD results indicator questions, which we're referring to as power standards, we wanted to make sure that we have a full impression of what a Verona School District culture and climate is. We want to inform about the direction of our district, and then communication, a culture of two-way communication. And so those will help inform our results indicators, and we also have indicators in the operations side of our policies that will use data from our survey results. So next steps, when we think about communication to our staff, we are creating a dashboard and service for that will allow academic services, special education, pupil services, HR, family, staff, and community engagement. And so we are looking at having the information broken down into those categories and distributed. At our August board meeting, is August 15th board meeting, August 15th board meeting. That'll be the full board report and presentation, as well as information sharing to our community on our results. This will give us an opportunity to have a lot of information that will inform any leadership moves that occur between now and the time school comes back. We didn't want to do it as a, we will also do it when staff reports back, but we felt that it was fair for our staff and the community to know the results going in, understand how it informed leadership moves, and set clear expectations of using data to drive our work moving forward. We are, as you know, our school-based leadership teams will be working throughout the summer, and they will begin utilizing this data to begin to but make decisions around strategies for culture and climate in their individual buildings. So another strong rationale of having this data out early was to allow our school-based leadership teams an opportunity to synthesize data, make meaning of it, and think about school-based strategies moving forward. Finally, this is where I'm going to need board approval, because this will be a calendar event to, I'll be very transparent. When you begin to look at the data, it's going to take far more than a board meeting session to dig into. You're going to have lots of questions. I'm going to have a lot of questions. We were digging into it. I think we looked at 2 questions today at cabinet, and we could have stayed there another 3 hours, just really asking what is and what is the right type of conversations to have. And so knowing our board and knowing the interest in culture and climate, and rightfully so, as representatives of our community, I'm going to ask the board to allow us to plan for and calendar a board retreat that specifically goes into climate and survey data and discuss recommendations moving forward. So I can move that or ask that to be an agenda item for our next board meeting, and then begin to think about dates to present for our vote to allow me to change the calendar. All right. Quick pause and any questions about the culture and climate survey in its current state.
Just to clarify, you said we're gonna see the results at our August meeting, but we'll schedule a retreat to actually dive into it.
Both. So some of the things that I want to make sure that is very clear now. First, that this tool or this process of culture and climate data will be new. So this will be the first round of information. So we are, normally we would have something to compare it to, and that won't necessarily be the case. When we look at the dashboard and begin to segregate the data, I think we'll be pleased to be able to look at school level data. We'll definitely be able to look at demographic breakout and be able to really tell the story of what our students, families, and staff are experiencing in our community. And it's not data for the purpose of shame, it's data for the purpose of growth and support, and making sure that we're putting our resources in the right spaces to support those that have indicated some areas where we want to grow. And that's what continuous improvement truly is. It's looking at data in meaningful ways to make sure our resources are used to support in an appropriate manner. So I can get in the presentation more already. I'm really excited about it, but I just wanted to kind of give you a head start on where we're at. All right. Quickly, before we go to the budget update, I want to ask the board's permission for a second discussion. We've given a lot of thought about how effective our student advisories were this year. And utilizing student voice and recognizing the power of student voice and allowing us to make really informed leadership decisions, because this is our future that we're talking about. I would like the board to consider having student representation on the Board of Education and having in essence, a student ambassador that serves in the capacity. This would have to be a board decision because it affects, the number here. It's not, you can determine if it's appointed or if you want to go to the application process, all those things, but it needs to start with a understanding if the board even interested in it at all. And so I just put it in the space for future consideration. If there's something that you wanted me to pursue as quickly as this year, I could expedite the process, but I just wanted to put it in a space, my feelings about how powerful student representation has been and the opportunity that would look like we have it on the board.
I would love to do something like that. I think anyone who's been part of the Aspen workshops, we've seen some great examples of student representation on boards and how valuable that has been to boards. So I think I would be a strong yes on doing that. I'm curious about the rest of the board.
Yeah, I would say the same. I think that my only kind of concern is the time commitment. We have a lot of board meetings. At least I feel like we have a lot of board meetings. Maybe I just have a lot of board meetings. So like, what would be our expectation of that student? And then also if we are compensating that student for their time as well.
I've seen other districts do a scholarship. So contribute to a scholarship for just board, student representation. That's what we have to do, just as an option.
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of having student voice on the board. I think there's a lot of different models of what it can look like, and I've heard of some that are not as successful as others. So I think we want to be thoughtful in how we move that forward. But I mean, I certainly don't have any objection to moving that forward. I think it's a good idea.
I agree with Joe. I'm very interested in it. I just want to make sure we put it in place in a way that's meaningful to the student, because I think the one complaint I have heard just from other district models is it needs to be more than just the students there without having real significant, voice or input. So I just think it would be good to look at other districts and see what model.
I think you have a general guest from the board who'd like to move forward with this, or at least to start exploring it. So-
And I will.
And we have a thumbs up from Jen.
Agreed.
And an agreed, yes, we're good. Okay, I think we are.
Okay. All right, so no more surprises or asked, I think,
I know.
for right now. But
You've
thank
reached
you.
your limit for today.
I used my quota for surprise slides. So thank you for that. At this time, I want to call Chad Weezy and Pete Brenner to do a preview of our state budget moving forward and a possible representative budget.
Good evening, board members. I at some points in the spring never thought we'd get to July 11th, but here we sit. So happy July 11th. Pete and I are here tonight. Claire, do you want to give the meeting? So we have a relatively brief presentation for the board tonight. Many of the things you'll be seeing will be a review. And again, throughout this process, it's been our commitment to continue to be as transparent with the community as possible. So we did include some slides. Folks are actually more interested in what's included in our public facing board docs, just to make sure that we had that as a resource for the community. We do have kind of four distinctly different bullets to go through tonight. We have some new information to share with the board, just a new way to look at a little bit of the history of the state budget and kind of the why We ended up at July 11th with a potential operating referendum vote tonight. And then just a preview of what the next 2-year state budget timeline and process will look like, just to make sure the board kind of knows where we're going post tonight, post November, and into next spring. We're reviewing the timeline tonight, kind of following the board vote, and more than anything, do's and don'ts related to what board members, what staff members, and what community members can expect regarding our responsibility to share information after a potential vote here, and then we will have a vote. Not included on the agenda, but I didn't want to call out the fact because I did promise the board would get this. I included as 2 resources the finalized capacity study done by Epstein Ewing to update school capacities. And I think kind of a married document that informs the study that Mark Roppers and MDR Roppers put together relative to our enrollment projections. And both studies are necessary. So for Mark to give us a 10, 15, 20-year idea of when our schools will start to fill up, the only way he could do that was to use sound data, and I think kind of best practice in the world of school architecture in terms of how many students our schools are comfortably fit. And Mark needed that information to really put together a very comprehensive report as far as enrollment growth goes. And I gave the board a preview of that at our last meeting. And the big idea there was we did not want the community or the board to be caught off guard. And all of a sudden, Chad and John Bremer are up here in the spring saying, oops, we forgot to tell you our schools are going to be full in a year and a half, and we're going to need to go back to the voters for a capital referendum. And that is not the case. There's all kinds of information in here I think the community will be interested in, and the board may be interested in. But the big idea is we'll start to see some schools getting tighter, in particular Sugar, Country View, and our Fitchburg sites down the road. But we won't even be talking about additional square footage for at least another 2 or 3 years. And odds are a ribbon cutting would be 2028, 2030 before our schools are getting to the point that we need to build. We've done all of the necessary prep work to make sure that we've lessened the tax impact when we get there. But more than anything, I want to just make sure the board had this information before we made a pretty critical vote tonight.
Could I
So-
interject with a question?
Absolutely.
Just curious, being a new board member, but knowing that this is something that happens occasionally, is any forecasting about like boundary conversations we'd have to have in order to mitigate like any one building outgrowing before another, just to sort of span this amount of time before logistically we need a new building, but where we have buildings sort of growing unevenly. Just, I think there was a question in there, but I can try to rephrase if necessary.
That's certainly a good question, Jen. And I think as part of OE12 and a part of our work just related to long-range facilities planning, boundary discussions always have to be in the mix. So it is hard to go to the community asking for additional square footage if you have a building sitting with 7 or 8 or 10 empty classrooms. Those can be difficult discussions for a district and a board, but necessary discussions. So they certainly aren't necessary this year or next. But as a site potentially like Country View that starts to fill up at a relatively quick pace here in the next 3 or 4 years and starts to feel full, those are discussions that we need to start to have as a board and as a community. So boundaries are certainly in the mix and are a way, in some cases, for if you're a growing district that thinks you're eventually going to plateau, sometimes those boundary discussions can be semi-permanent solutions. In the case of the Verona area school district, from what you'll read in Mark's report, we're going to continue to grow decades to come. So the boundary change discussions would likely be stopgap measures to fill up our schools, and the board and the community would have to make a decision at that time if some of the headaches that go along with the boundary move are necessary as 2 or 3 year solutions prior to building some new square footage. But boundaries could certainly be in the mix. Ed, I think there's just some interesting information in there. So please go through that, and if we need to do a follow-up board meeting on it, go ahead. It's interesting that a booming neighborhood like Glacier Edge 10, 15 years ago is now one of our older established neighborhoods. And those homes are not producing as many school-age children as they did a decade ago. And then you got pockets of new construction that are producing many more students, and that's kind of what Mark built into that report. All right, any other questions on that? Perfect.
So just quickly, Jen, I just want to put in the, Jen, if this wasn't where you were going with it, just stop me, but as also, there's boundary discussions and there's also educational setting discussions, like how big do you want the educational setting to be, even if you have the space. So those are things that we will continue to look at as well. So it's a both and as part of your conversation.
Yeah, thank you. That's an interesting and helpful clarification too. Thanks.
Thanks for that, Dr. Larry. We certainly do have at least one very large elementary school and one large middle school. Eventually down the road, this building can fit nearly 3,000 students. And we'll have to ask ourselves if we're comfortable with a high school running at that capacity. That's a decade down the road, but we have to also make a decision. All right, all great discussions, but the good news is in the short term, we have an operating issue, not a capital issue. So Pete and I have been working on this slide behind the scenes for a couple of months, and we finally got it to a spot that we were comfortable with. I think attempting to explain it to the board. And this is in some ways the why behind many districts, including the Verona Area School District, having a need to ask for extra revenue authority in addition to the state imposed revenue limit. And I'm going to do my best to paraphrase what I had Pete built here, and if there are technical questions, that's why we have Pete. What we attempted to do here is I had Pete build two different lines. One, essentially, what the state imposed revenue limit has been over the last decade plus. And then the board has seen that. They've seen that up and down line, that's that blue line. And then two, if we took CPIU and put it up against and put essentially a state imposed revenue limit that would reflect the annual rate of inflation. This red line is what would be our current revenue limit from 2006 to 2023, if that makes sense. I think an easier way to put it would be if the state responded to the rate of inflation on an annual basis. This year we're dealing with 4.7. They would have given us an increase to our revenue limit of 4.7% this year. And you can see that we've widened the gap substantially over almost the last 2 decades. There have been two things that have just been released over the last couple of days that have mentioned how far behind the state of Wisconsin is in terms of funding for education. So I think this was just posted this afternoon, over the last decade, we are number 47 in the nation in terms of our percentage growth, in terms of funding education at the state level. Number 47. Over the last 2 decades, we've gone from 11th in the nation to 26th in the nation. And I think these two bar graphs kind of orchestrate the fact that we've continued to underfund education related to inflation, and really the reason we're in an operating referendum discussion tonight. Wanted this as a resource both for the board and the community, and wanted to know if you guys had any questions, but just kind of some added new information from the board to have at their school. Okay, and then the next piece that Pete and I wanted to make sure the board knew. I certainly heard Joe ask a couple questions about upcoming timelines relative to the state budget. So 2 things to keep in mind in terms of us previewing what's going to happen in the future. A reminder to the board that we're building in what could be conservative, but who knows, optimistic, $100 increase to our revenue limit that would be released sometime next spring. And those are guesses. We could see more than that, and then again, the board would have the option of potentially not using all the levying authority that they may gain from a successful referendum. We are dialing back increased property valuation and to a conservative 3.5. But again, that's all speculation. This year will be closer to 12. But we're also seeing increased interest rates and the real estate market already starting to cool off because of interest rates spiking. So we built in 3.5% for increased property value, and wanted to remind the board that we're going to continue to spend down ESSER funds, and those assumptions are built into both the passing and the non-passing budget. And then I think related, just kind of a preview of what we'll be doing this upcoming, late winter, early spring. So you can expect in February that DPI will release a proposed budget. There is a decent chance that a pretty large numbers in terms of the per pupil revenue limit is released by DPI as a proposed budget in response to inflation going through the roof. We're looking at 7 to 8% for CPI for next year's budget. At that point, it lands on the governor's desk. The governor has a chance to respond, endorse it, make some other suggestions, and then send it to the Joint Finance Committee in April. And then May all the way through early summer into the fall, the budget kind of bounces around at the state level before it passes. The timing is super correct for us to go to referendum in November because we may not have a passed state budget until middle to late summer for next year, and it would be nearly impossible for us to run our school district as we're kind of forecasting if we didn't ask this question. Questions about either of those two things, assumptions we're building into the future budget or future timelines? No questions, I think it's a good thing. This is a review of the work that the board has done. This is one of those slides I included just to make sure the public knows we have had a long, windy road to get to July 11th. And this is all the work we've done to get ourselves to both a balanced budget and what we are considering a reasonable operating referendum proposal built with our capital needs in mind and our taxpayers in mind. This is a new slide for the board. This is what I kind of previewed before. So this is what likely things will look like for us over the next 5 months following our vote tonight. Wanted to spend a little bit more time here. So we'll have a board vote tonight. If the board ends up passing a $19 million recurring referendum vote that will go on a November ballot, we have a busy 5 months. In the short term, Pete's already done all the necessary groundwork to file the information relative to the board vote with DPI. We've already done preliminary work with our municipalities and county clerk to give them a heads up this vote was coming, and then Pete would likely be in contact with them in the month of July, and then we will continue to have a referendum committee meet, and that is really going to be the task of that group is really just going to be to make sure that the community is as informed as possible relative to what's on the ballot in November. Then in August, we will finalize our community information plan materials. We'll schedule information sessions kind of heading into the start of the school year. September and October will be busy for us, where there is a decent chance we are sending information out to our voters. We are holding input sessions. Dr. Clarity, Dr. Hawkinson and I met today on the work that will be necessary for community input relative to the strategic framework and our graduate journey or graduate profile. And there will be a call for community input and community information sharing in September and October. And those will be busy months to make sure folks are as informed as possible. October will be, we'll have 2 things going. We'll have an information sharing campaign going on with our community. And then we have a really big month in October as we finalize the budget. That will be when we get final property values in and we get our final state aid posted and Pete, it's October 15th. All that comes together, and then we'll have all the information we need heading into that board, into the election in November. Big day on November 8th. If the referendum were to pass, then we'd inform municipalities, I guess either way, what the final levy will be and necessary paperwork in early November. That is a quick preview of kind of what we'll have ahead of us for the next 5 months. Questions at all there?
So we have property value estimations in before we'll have to set the mill rate.
We are working with estimates for the preliminary budget and for the purpose of estimated mill rates regarding a past referendum. Those estimates become real numbers in mid-October. And that's when the state actually posts what they call equalized value. And that number can actually be different than the assessed value that a municipality posts. But the state will give us the total property value of the Verona area school district in mid-October. And then we will no longer be working off of estimates. We will have a past budget with a given levy. And the board's been managing that all along, and you'll have a vote on that tonight, kind of. And then really what happens there is then the mill rate is determined. So if the state aid comes in higher than we estimated, and it might be, that would be good news for us, because that is then money that the taxpayers don't have to kick in to cover that levy. It means the state's kicking in, that's the aid part. And if property values come in higher than we had estimated, and I think our numbers are fairly conservative, that also means the mill rate would lower because we have more property value to tax against when we hit October. So those are the two big remaining variables for us to finally set what really will be the mill rate. We'll set, we should know our levy, and we have a very good idea of our levy already with the preliminary budget passed. All right, no other questions there. That was a good question. All right, so ahead of the board vote, and we included, we've been working with Quarles and Brady, which is kind of the state standard as far as legal counsel heading into a referendum. And they put together a kind of a fact sheet that we included for the board in board docs. This is a high level summary, but we wanted to make sure that both board members and potentially staff members watching the board meeting tonight we're aware of kind of the do's and don'ts relative to once we have a board that is passed a referendum and it's pre-November 8th, there are some things we can do and some things we can't do. These will certainly also be talking points that will likely end up in writing to the staff, either from my desk or Dr. Clarity's desk in the fall. And we'll probably go through some of this at our back to school conference when we've got all the staff here at high school. So just a few things to keep in mind as we work our way through the next 5 months. Big idea here is that we may use district funds to inform the public in terms of what's on the ballot. And that's really what that first bullet is. That is okay to do. It's in some ways not a whole lot different than Dr. Clarity mailing home a newsletter or any of the other information materials we use district resources to make sure our community is informed. What is not okay and can't be done with district funds or district people on the clock is to advocate for voting yes for the referendum. So anything that would sound like support, vote for, elect, or advocacy in the other direction, vote against, defeat, or reject, is not okay for public employees to do so, or use district funds to do one of the two. And that does include use of computer equipment. So it would not be okay, even though it may not cost anything for as far as paper goes, for Marcy to post, please support the referendum on November 8th on a Facebook page. And it will be important for our staff to understand that those are the ground rules. And this can get a little tricky, especially with social media now, and we'll just have to make sure our staff's informed as possible to just kind of watch social media now with the power of the world in your hand in the form of a smart cell phone. It's easy to like, or it's easy to put things on social media during the workday, even if you're at lunch, that can start to get tricky with the community. So I wanted to make sure the board saw this and our community saw this as well.
Yeah, just to clarify, though, outside of work hours, staff has the free ability to express their views. It just can't be during work hours using school equipment. And I think there's just a caution.
That is exactly right. So Dr. Clarity and I will likely take a fairly conservative approach with our administrative team. You will not see Chad in a sandwich board at 4 o'clock every day saying, well, yes, that doesn't happen. But our district staff can certainly do so after work hours. They are certainly entitled to do so and advocate once they're essentially off the clock. So Meredith, you are 100% correct. No advocacy while they're here and after hours if they're part of committees, if there's an upstart or yes crew that happens that meets after school, that's certainly within their rights. They just can't do it essentially with taxpayer resources. If they're being paid for, serving our students, it wouldn't be time for them to advocate for an operation.
So you're saying the sandwich board could happen on a Saturday?
Potentially, but I again,
Just wanted to make sure
I
we
think
weren't ruling it out completely.
you will like to, I think you'll likely see at least our administrative team take a fairly conservative approach there as salaried employees that work outside the hours of 8 to 4, but certainly our teaching staff and support staff after their contract hours are done, they will be free to voice their opinion either way.
Thank you.
You bet. So that is essentially what this next slide talks about in terms of administration and staff, that they are essentially locked into information sharing with district resources or district time, and those boundaries are lifted as far as the district time and what we can talk about or advocate for after work hours. The board is slightly different. I wanted to make sure that all of you saw this. Board members are technically not considered employees of the district. Which means you can freely speak for or against the referendum. Quarles and Brady, more than anything, wanted to make sure the board understood that it is important when you're communicating with the public, if you're advocating or you're saying this is a bad idea, that you're speaking for yourself but not the board. And I think boards can get themselves in tricky spots where a board member can say, hey, I heard you were saying this in the community that this had full board support, and really board members should be speaking for themselves if they're talking about the referendum. And that was a big highlight that Quarles and Brady wanted to make sure we heard.
So Chad, just to clarify, so again, social media, some of us may have individual, social media pages, but then also maybe board member social media pages. Is there a distinction for board members in how we use those pages?
Yeah, that's a super question. And if we want at some point, as we roll into the fall here, Allison from Quarles and Brady would actually be available to come back and talk to the board. We got into the weeds enough with Allison that things like using your VASD Verona.K12 email account starts to turn into a gray area because you technically could say for you to hold up that server, to have Dan Wang in our basement making sure email works every day is a district resource. And if you're emailing someone from that email extension, in some ways, someone could make the tangential kind of connection that you're using a district resource to advocate for a referendum. I think Allison would tell you to keep it clean. It is best to use personal social media accounts and personal email as you're discussing the referendum. If you're stepping outside of the area of sharing certainly feel free if you're using your district email to do so, but share information. And then if you step into the world of advocacy, probably safest not to use district email. If that helps.
That does. Thank you. Thank you for the clarifications.
Can I ask a clarifying question about just conversation then? Is it as simple if I'm just having a chat with someone from the community and they're asking, informational questions, I can make it clear that I'm happy to answer those questions, in terms of information we're sharing as a board. And then if they're asking more personal thoughts to just say, as a individual, I mean, is that really just prefacing sort of the aspects of dialogue? And
Yeah.
does that kind of keep things clean?
I think that's very fair. That if you're sharing information, if essentially you are reciting whatever text would be on our very informative website, it's fair to say that it's almost impossible to speak for the board when you're just sharing factual information that would be a resource for everyone. If the conversation turns into here's why it's a good idea, then just making clear that you're speaking for yourself and the entire board. Because all of you may have different ideas on even why voting yes on the referendum would be a good thing, and that's where you kind of step outside speaking for the board, and you want to just make sure you speak for yourself.
And I would just reiterate, if anyone has any questions as you come across it, and I'm sure you're reiterating this to staff, check in and ask. This is one of those areas that there is a legal issue that we want to make sure that we are, complying with. So at least, feel free to check in so you're making bounce ideas.
It'll be important over the next 5 months that everyone in this room or on this Zoom, we want the work to be about making sure that the community is as informed as possible. We don't want the work to be about unnecessary distraction. And that would be an example of an unnecessary distraction. Someone kind of raises the flag and say, this is advocacy, or you guys stepped outside the line here. And all of a sudden we're defending that instead of just making sure that folks are as informed as possible on what's on the ballot. And again, more details on the full fact sheet that I shared with the board at 4 docs, but that was a high level summary. Again, the board has seen this a number of times. My main point of continuing to include this slide is that the rationale and the thought behind what went into this operating question is a mill rate neutral. That's important to continue to say that. Mill rate neutral question where our levy would be the same regardless of a yes or no vote. This is just making sure that folks potentially flipping through these resources tonight can see we are projecting an 1178 for next year, and that's the exact same 1178 that sits in a potential referendum. There are some nuances on our 1178, 0% CPI increase for our staff, spending a little more on paying down capital debt, and a staffing freeze going in place in terms of new staff members this upcoming year. And the board should continue to know that, yeah, here would be the result of a no. And we would have some incredibly difficult decisions to make around compensation related to inflation. With a no budget and amend the budget in post-November if a referendum weren't to pass, and that's what we've been talking about. Again, the board has seen this, but we've done our work. I think Pete and I have a crystal ball by the time we actually get to November, that there's a decent chance we're lower than 1178. I think we may do a little better on state aid than we had initially thought. And there's a chance that 12% growth in property valuation actually comes in a little higher than we had projected. But the entire state landscape is important when we get those numbers in October. But that is a mill rate with a passing or non-passing referendum, and significantly lower than it's been in years past. A reminder is we're going into what would come from a potential referendum. We will continue to leverage those TID dollars. We'll utilize the prepayment that happened at Fund 39. And this would be the elevator speech for anyone who wants to know what's kind of built into our referendum scenario. We have done what we can to protect taxpayers by building this budget, and our staff currently receive 0% CPI. If a referendum were to pass, we've built in and signed a contract that would give our staff a 4.7% cost of living increase for 22 and 23. I again want to double down on thanking both BAE and VESPA for the partnership that happened this entire summer and fall to get to a signed contract with a 0% CPI increase. This has been a huge hot button issue for many school districts in the state, including Dane County, where staff members are flat out demanding 4.7%. Our staff understood our approach, and they signed a contract with 0% pending a past referendum. We did build in CPI adjustments for future years. That's what the 19 million would be spent on. There is an adjustment to Fund 41, where we would build in a capital expansion fund, which is essentially building in money that we have to spend on maintaining our facilities. Again, to the board, as we're working with the community, this is the responsible thing to do to take care of great assets like we're sitting in tonight. And planning for the long term to maintain our sites, so you're not on referendum repeat when a roof goes bad. We built it into the budget moving forward, and we projected the mill rate to be the same 1178 as we did in a non-passing budget. a refresher for the board and the community on all the legwork that happened in the spring and summer. It seems like a little while ago now, but it wasn't. Many school and community sessions where we saw pushing 1,000 folks to discuss and gather feedback relative to our current scenario. There's just a little snapshot of the work that we did all spring and summer. Again, Dr. Clarity went through these. I will not read these all these bullets for the board again, but Dr. Clarity went through some of the themes that we saw, and certainly saw by and large support from our schools and our community relative to this approach. We're almost there. So this is the budget we've been working now on for nearly half a year, where we would now levy a little less towards Fund 39 on that prepayment on debt, allocate more money for CPI adjustments for our staff, and increasing some FTE to keep our class size reasonable. And that is all built into this budget. As I mentioned to the board, for next year, we projected $100 per pupil increase. And if the state came in through with more than that, we would simply not have to levy as much, not levy as much in terms of our additional authority from that past referendum. And again, this is a single, simple ask. $19 million of recurring revenue authority. As board members are talking to community members, one of the most important things to reiterate to community members is that this is permission to manage our budget. This is not a wholesale commission that we're going to dump $19 million onto the levy for next year. This is just giving the board permission to continue to manage the mill rate and operate our school district. They do not need the board or any future board members do not need to use all 19 million. You won't use all 19 million. But odds are you won't use all 19 million next year. That can stretch out 3, 4, 5, 6 years, depending on what happens with inflation and the state budget. All right. We had a question around, and Meredith, this is almost word for word what your vote's going to look like. So we are getting close to closing out the superintendent's report, and then we would move into board action, having a vote for the referendum. Just wanted the board one more time to see what would land on the ballot. We saw that at the last meeting, and this will be reiterated with both Meredith will call. And that is it. I want to thank the board members for all the work that went into the last 6 months to get us to tonight, and then open it up for questions. And that is it from a finance update standpoint.
I know I speak for the board when I say thank you to you and Pete for all the work that you did to get us to this point and to keep us educated and informed throughout the process. I feel really good about the foundational knowledge that we have, as well as our information as we move forward. Are there any questions from the board at this time? We have asked all of our questions over and over of you, many, many meetings. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Chad and Pete. Very thorough as it's been throughout this this process, and I want to double down on what my president just stated. Just been able to articulate very clearly the action steps in the process, the why behind it, and continuing to keep not just our board, but our full community updated along the way. So much out to that tremendous work. With that, with the permission of the board, I will ask to move item 4 under board action, and then close the superintendent's report to move that to the purview of the board.
That sounds good. Okay, board, we're going to take a look at referendum vote number 1. It's the resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limit by 19 million for recurring purposes. I'll read the resolution and then I'll ask for a motion in a second. Be it resolved by the school board of the Verona Area School District, Dane County, Wisconsin, that the revenues included in the school district budget be authorized to exceed the revenue limit specified in section 121.91 Wisconsin statutes by 19 million for the 2022-23 school year and thereafter for recurring purposes consisting of expenses related to ongoing educational programming, maintaining and supporting instructional and extracurricular programs, and paying salary and other operational expenses. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
I have a motion from Yana. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Joe. At this point, we'll do a roll call vote, starting with Joe,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Yana,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
Nicole,
Aye.
and I am I as well. This resolution has passed unanimously. The next board vote for the referendum is a resolution providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of a resolution authorizing the school district budget to exceed revenue limits by 19 million for recurring purposes. Do I have a motion to approve this resolution?
So moved.
I have a motion from Yana. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second from Joe. Again, we'll do all in favor by roll call vote. Oh,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Yana,
Aye.
Christina,
Aye.
Jen,
Aye.
and Nicole.
Aye.
And I am I as well. This resolution has also passed unanimously. Thank you, everybody. Thank you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Great job.
Potential referendum.
We have worked very hard to get there. Good job.
Actually hard after read today, my brain.
Everybody can breathe now. Everybody can breathe. Now the real words.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, we appreciate it.
Can I different superintendent report right up here?
Yeah.
So first, I want to say thank you to our Board of Education for the unanimous vote and entrusting the work of our administrative team to make sure that our community is fully informed about referendum referendum question at this time. So I also at this time wanted to transition away from a referendum question and say thank you to our Board of Education for a very thorough and meaningful evaluation of me last session. And what I learned throughout the process, as well as clear guidance of how to continue to move forward and improve my craft, was very meaningful. So I'd like to say thank you for that. In closing, I would be remiss if I did not give a strong shout out to, I passionately and personally call it my team, but it's the community's team of leaders that I work with, and many of them are in our room right now, as well as that I get to work with on a daily basis that have contributed so much to this first year, and allowing me to really do my best work as superintendent. So I want to give a shout out to the team that's really supported the guidance, and to every staff member that's allowed me to listen, learn, and grow because of their voice. So a lot of shout outs along the way, but and just a commitment for me to be here for the long haul and continue to maintain the high expectations that the board has set in front of me. So thank you again.
Thank you. I know the board shares your gratitude for your administrative team and your administrative gratitude for the staff as well. So, and happy anniversary. You've officially hit the 1 year mark.
No doubt.
So
Let's
it
do
is
it.
no longer an inaugural year. It's-
Let's do a referendum and a strategic plan and a year one. Knock it off.
Now go.
Okay, are we done with
We are.
superintendent
We are.
report? Okay. Board, we have a request to move OE 10 to August 1st, regular board meeting. This was in response, if I could summarize, just for, do you want to, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you, board, for considering moving OE 10 to the August 1st board. This is twofold, one intentional, one actually unintentional. We had a transition in some of our leadership, but also provide an opportunity for us to train some newer staff members on how to do OE processes, and we wanted to give them a meaningful amount of time to train, practice, and be able to present their best work. And we felt like a couple week extension would allow for our team to be thoroughly trained and produce great work. What we weren't sure about timing wise, but it ended up working to our favor, is that we feel like we'll have a stronger interpretation and stronger indicators because we now have data from the culture and climate surveys. And so we can use that more comprehensively to inform the indicators, so that ends up working out well. If we have permission to extend it, then we can also add some, not add the data, but we can think about how the indicators will play out because we have these new resources.
And does this change anything else with the calendar, or this just moves the OE from July to August 1st, or do we want to reserve?
No, we think we're still on track. It does make the annual meeting a little more interesting, because that's also the annual meeting on August 1st. Believe it or not, we're ready to go again for another annual meeting. But yeah, with the team that we are utilizing to prep this next week, it'll be a very meaningful conversation, and we know how important OE10 is because it relates to student behavior safety.
Thank you for summarizing. I have no objection to moving things as long as the rest of the board is in agreement. Do we want to take a formal vote on this? If so, do I have a motion?
So moved.
It sounds like Archer might.
Archer?
Is
Archer feels very strongly about it. Yeah.
I appreciate the advocacy there, Archer. Okay, but I do have a
Our
motion
future
from John.
BASD students said we should just move it till August 1st.
I have a motion from John, an informal second from Archer, but I would like a second from the board.
Second.
A second from Yana. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
And has officially been moved to August 1st. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment here tonight? No public comment. We'll move to superintendent's consent agenda. Are there any questions? Hearing none, the superintendent consent agenda is approved. We'll move to the board's consent agenda. Are there any questions? Hearing none, the board's consent agenda has been approved. We take a look at future agenda items. Today is July 11th, isn't it? July 25th is a regular board meeting. Again, we have our annual meeting and then a regular board meeting following on August 1st, and August 15th is a regular board meeting. We also have some back to school activities that will be coming up, so we'll be getting those on calendars as well. Okay, are there any questions about future agenda items? I know we talked about doing a workshop for data for the climate survey. Would that be something that we can send out a doodle poll maybe to get some dates, or do we want to wait and put that down on the next agenda?
So we will send it out, but to get the quality work that we want to do, it'll need to be a Saturday date to be able to do. So we'll send that out probably tomorrow.
Lock down a Saturday, so we have to start early. So
Absolutely.
that sounds great.
And then can I just quickly make a quick note about the 25th? The 25th, we are excited for our convocation as we, it's July and we're ready to prepare to bring staff and students back already, but it's, we're excited. This is the time of year where we get to think about our plans and really communicate openly with our staff around how collectively we'll move together. We invite all board members to be present, just if you could let us know about your status so we can determine if we need to notice it or not. But we'll be in the PAC and ready for it. And we also have the National Teacher of the Year as our, like the National Teacher of the Year as our keynote speaker.
Okay. So that's August 25th. What time is that?
9.
9. Board, I would highly recommend if you can make it. This is a great event, and it's just a really nice way to kick off the school year. I know that Christina, Nicole, and Jen and I were at the last year, and it was, first of all, Dr. Hawkins is quite a master of ceremonies. But I would highly recommend you penciling that in on your calendars. It's a great opportunity to connect with staff and show support for the district. Okay.
You said 9 a.m. for that?
Yes. Okay, if there is Nothing else from the board. Do I have a motion to adjourn? So moved. Motion from Yana. Do I have a second? Johnny, you look perplexed.
Are we doing the board debrief after? Anyone?
We can, if you would like to.
That's just
I
on
just saw
here.
it on there yet.
Okay,
But I'm
we'll do
also
an
fine
informal
with it.
adjournment so we can let our admin team go. And then if we do an official adjournment after we do a board debrief. And John, since you brought it, kick us off. Do we want to give a minute for admin to?
I'm out here.
Well, we can do board debriefs without you, right? All right.
I would say you might even prefer it.
No, can't say that out loud.
All right, John, kick us off.
So I actually don't have a whole lot to say, which is unusual. I feel like I've been quiet this whole time. You know, I feel like we haven't done this for a little while though, which is why I made a point to point it out. And I think it's good to do it. So if anything, I think I'm just wanting to make sure that we're not getting so used to these meetings being so well focused on board work and business and running so smoothly that we're not continuing to do the work to kind of check ourselves. I know I've been guilty of kind of, yes, things are cruising along, good. And I just want to make sure we're still interrogating them and doing a good job as we go through it. So yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add. I think maybe I could have spoken up more. But again, it all seems so clear. I felt compelled to say something about the new graph that we got with the lines showing inflation as compared to per pupil dollars. And I didn't say anything, and I kind of wish I would have. But other than that, I'm good. This is a good, efficient meeting. And I think this meeting, more than other meetings, is a culmination of a lot of work to inform and do things right going into it, so that even though this is kind of this penultimate meeting that covered a lot of things, it really didn't have to be long and complicated as the work you did that.
I
So,
appreciate your
that's,
involvement. I think that's a huge shout out to the team for getting us there and for the board for asking some very detailed questions throughout the last months of meetings. Anyone else?
I'll piggyback on what John said about the image that showed inflation versus per pupil revenue. I was noting that that image should be used. I think we need to emphasize that because we've obviously spent a lot of time as a board mulling over all iterations of financial information and charts and graphs and all of that kind of stuff. And that was a really good snapshot explanation of how education funding has gone. So I agree with you, John. We should bring that up again. Sometimes it's hard as a board member, I think, because we get so much information and the preparation's been very good for the vote on this, but also to remember that the public needs very clear snapshots for understanding our decision making, right? Because obviously they weren't here for the hours and hours and hours, all the charts and graphs that we looked at. So. that was my one thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, just I wanted to so for me, I was very I don't know, I flashed right back to 2011 as I looked at the dates on the x-axis there. I remember being so vexed at governing decisions being pushed out to school districts and localities from the state government. And those of us that were in education at the time were very upset about it. And we're saying this is what's going to happen. This divergence in how you fund students is what's going to happen. And we're very fortunate here that we haven't really felt the brunt of that. There are a lot of communities that aren't as fortunate, that aren't growing, don't have an increasing tax base, and are bearing the full brunt of that game of politics. And so I was really, really angry. And now I've said what I wanted to say. So I feel better.
Thank you, John.
All right. That's just, thanks for letting me cue that up.
Well, I think it's fine once in a while, because I think we've mulled over so much leading up to this referendum vote that one might be surprised how quiet we were leading up to that vote and how unified we were in our vote. But if we went back and looked at the other meetings, we realized there was so much preparation. So I think it's okay for us to make comments.
Yeah.
And just speaking for myself, I kind of internalized the district's limitations on their communication surrounding the referendum and the relatively few restrictions that we have on ourselves personally in terms of advocacy. I kind of shifted my mentality to, all right, what am I going to do? Because I mean, the district they can do as much information sharing as they can to try and inform the public, but their information sharing can't have that advocacy piece. That frankly, if I go out and I talk to a voter, I can advocate. I mean, I can make clear that it's only on my behalf, and I'm not speaking for everyone else on the board, but we can advocate. And so I was a little more quiet during the session than I usually would be, both because we've already gone over all this 100 times, and also because in my mind, that's where I was. I was already trying to plan out what's next for us as board members.
Jen, Yana?
Yeah, I would say I agree. I think that it's been, since we introduced where we were, there have been a ton of new things that have come about. This has been a lot of meetings, a lot of discussions, a lot of back and forth. I really appreciate the fact that as a board, we have the information and the knowledge to even educate the community about the decisions that we're making. So yes, I agree with us moving in this direction, but I can clearly articulate why. And that feels really good, to be able to be open and honest about why we're here, how we got here, and being able to give historical context. So I think we moved through this meeting pretty quickly because there have been probably 15 to 20 meetings that we didn't move through super quickly because we wanted to make sure that we got all of that information.
Jen, do you have anything to
Yes,
add?
to Yada's last comments. Totally encapsulated my thinking.
You're
And just
welcome.
gratitude for all of you, in folding me in virtually so I can be a part of all of the discussion. I like being a part of the work, and being absent just doesn't feel right. So thank you.
Thank you for being willing to zoom in. I would just like to say how much I appreciate the board stepping into different areas of strength and leadership throughout this, and areas that resonate through our communications workshop, through our budgeting, through our referendum work. I am grateful that our community has a board that is so willing to become involved in different areas and use their skills and leadership in ways that contribute to what's best for our students. So I think John, your point's taken that when things are moving smoothly, we shouldn't just sit back and just assume they'll continue to move smoothly. But I've been very grateful to be part of this board with all of you and all the work that you're doing. So thank you. All right, so that said, do I have now a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A motion from John, do I have a second?
Second.
Second from Joe, all in favor, signify with aye.
Aye.
We are officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Feel
you.
better, Jen.
Jen, thank you
Thanks.
for your work today with the leadership or the communications. And Christina, thank you for that. I really appreciate both of you stepping in to do that, and Nicole too.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.
Bye.
As soon as I started talking, I was like, can I talk about the communications workshop or not?
I thought about that too.